All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It is Thursday. It is California time, and welcome back to Deering Live. Thank you so much. We've been away for a few weeks, and we missed you all. But we're back, and really, really happy to be here. It's the California stay-at-home order has forced me into my backyard. But we do have some fun to get through today. So before I do that, though, a couple of announcements because so much has happened since we last met. The Giving Tuesday charity banjos are currently live, and they are due to end today in about 3 hours, 6 p.m. Pacific time. So if anyone wants to go check that out, there is a link in the chat room. You can go take a look at it. It is 6 wonderful banjos, all custom designed and signed by the likes of Steve Martin, Mumford & Sons, Dropkick Murphys, Rhiannon Giddens, Kevin Nealon, and more. And all of the proceeds from these wonderful banjos will be going to 6 incredible charities. So I do urge you to go check those out for a last-minute opportunity to bid. Also, a quick reminder that we are running the Stocking Stuffers sale right now on the site, which ends this evening. I'm going to drop a link to that in the chat in just a second. And just on that note, it is holiday time. People are ordering lots and lots of cool things, such as this very fetching Deering hoodie that I'm wearing, and this very even more fetching Deering coffee mug, which really does help the coffee taste very good. But I urge you to go over to deeringbanjos.com and find out something you can get. Sunday, December 13th at midnight is going to be the really last time that we can guarantee shipping within the US to get there in time for Christmas. So do pay attention to that and don't miss out. But it is my pleasure today. Let me see if I can pull him up here. And he is there. Mr. Chris Coole, how are you?
I'm doing good. How's it going, Jamie?
Pretty good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. And I'm going to pull that off right here. And we'll get into it. So Chris, for those of you who don't know, we're very excited to talk to Chris today. Chris picked up the banjo, I think, when he was 17 years old, after falling in love with early country music and folk music. And today he is known internationally for his amazing clawhammer banjo style, songwriting, singing, as well as a multitude of sideman and production credits to his name. And aside from solo performances, Chris also plays regularly with Ivan Rosenberg, the wonderful Lonesome Ace Stringband, and the David Francey Band. Please welcome Mr. Chris Coole. Great having you here, sir.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I sort of wish I was in California right now, but
You know,
we have to. We're doing the serious distancing.
this is I don't know how many
2,000
miles
miles,
apart, but
There's no way we're going to get each other sick.
nah, this is we don't need to wear masks right this second together. So on that note, we traditionally invite our guests to play a little tune for us. Would you mind bringing us in?
Sure thing. I thought I'd start off with. I was actually just teaching this tune to somebody the other day, and it's one of my very favorite tunes to play on the banjo. It's called Camp Meeting on the 4th of July, and it's originally a fiddle tune that I learned from the great James Bryan, who's one of my favorite musicians in the whole world. And
Awesome.
I'll just I'll play it.
Take it away.
Yeah, that sounded great.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for being here, Chris. Good to have you. So why don't you give us a little background about yourself? How you got started playing the banjo.
Okay. I was saying to you guys just before we started here, I live in Toronto, Canada, and I've lived in this city my entire life, 47 years, almost 48. I'm 47 and 10 eighths. No, 10 twelfths. Anyways,
February
and
is your birthday, I'm guessing.
I started. I definitely didn't have like any of this type of music in my family background or anything like that in my culture. I've pretty much lived in right downtown in the city my entire life. I got into, but I always loved music, and I came from a family that definitely listened to a lot of music and appreciated. And when I started playing guitar when I was about 13, there was a guitar course at my high school, and so started getting how it is when as soon as you start playing an instrument, your ears just open up like 200% from where they were. It doesn't matter what type of instrument. It's just like all of a sudden music is this different thing. So my ears got opened up a bit when I started playing, and started hearing banjo on different things. And I was really into the Andy Griffith Show.
Okay.
At the time, like obsessed with it. I had all 249 episodes on VHS tape.
Wow.
I was like a complete expert on that show. This is like when I was about 12 or 13. So I started like had such a romantic attachment to the banjo from that show, and then hearing it on like those transitional albums, like on a John Denver album, or then I heard I Got Old and in the Way, and all those things that sort of lead you down the path.
Right.
Neil Young. By the time I was 17, I got my first banjo.
Right. Yeah. And you got it. You went out and bought it yourself.
My folks gave it to me for Christmas, so I actually always know exactly how many years I've played. So this will be 30 years this Christmas.
Wow, that's great. And did you have a teacher in the area?
Yeah, I had my very first banjo teacher was a close friend of mine, Chris Quinn, who I didn't know at the time, but since then we've played together forever.
Right.
And who's a great bluegrass banjo player, one of the best I've ever played with for sure. And I started taking bluegrass banjo lessons, and then I remember one day I was listening to Doc Watson record and listening to Shady Grove, and I remember calling Chris. And I'm like, "What the hell is this that I'm hearing?" And he's like, "Oh, that's frailing or clawhammer." Or
right.
And I was like, "Oh my god, I got to learn that." And I met, I was at an open stage, and there was a fellow who played the cuckoo, and I totally got blown away by that. His name was Rick Fielding, and he was like, he'd been a professional folk musician from the 60s. He was sort of like one of those like Renaissance man 60s folk revival guys who he played like Reverend Gary Davis stuff on guitar, and he could play mandolin, and he could frail the banjo, he could play bluegrass banjo, sort of like a jack of all trades folk, working folk guy who had been a bar musician. And I went up to him, and he taught, and so I went over to his house, and this is like I guess like 1990.
Right. Yeah.
So he hadn't seen a young person interested in folk music. Like it just wasn't a thing. It's weird. Like now there's banjos everywhere, and you see it all over the place. And I mean, it's still not in the mainstream, but it's definitely a hell of a lot more in the mainstream than it was then. And he just the idea of anyone young being interested in any of that type of music just sort of freaked him out. And he was like, as soon as he saw I was into it, he was just like, oh, he just was like, oh, you got to come over. And I would just skip school and go and hang out with him, and he'd lend me records. Every time I'd go home from his house, I'd have about 15, 20 records in a bag to go home and listen to. And some of them are actually in that collection behind there. And he was, both him and Chris Quinn were amazing in the fact that they weren't just teachers, they were the guys that gave you the mixtapes and lent you the records, which is, those guys are so important, right?
Right. They, you could hang out with them. It wasn't just a lesson sort of thing.
It wasn't just a lesson, and they were just like you got to hear this, because they knew that that really that's what was going to set you down the path. It wasn't them being like, put your index finger here now. It was like, listen to this, and that's what was going to draw you into the music.
Yeah. That's you're lucky you had some good teachers around you. We're the same age, and so I started as a teenager as well in the Boston area. But
there must have been tons of players around there.
Not that I knew. There were looking back, but not in my universe.
Right. It's so much circumstance, right? And these like I happen to be. I mean, just these little coincidences that draw you down, and you think, man, that could have gone differently, and everything would have been so different.
And what were you looking, if you can remember, what were some of the kind of troubles that you had, or things you had to really get over, improve, things you had to shed, when you're a beginner, some of those problem areas that you really kind of solved yourself eventually, because we have a lot of beginners watching, and so it's nice for them to hear that you had the same issues when you're starting out as well, and how did you get through them?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest issue literally at that time was that, like, this is pre-internet,
right?
There, you just didn't see anybody. I mean, even this fellow that Rick Fielding, who showed me, he only knew how to play like straight claw or frailing banjo, and he didn't know how to drop thumb. He didn't know a double thumbing. So,
right.
And then there wasn't like the access to the music. So literally, it was like I scoured the record stores, and I would go and find this and that, and like it wasn't like these days you can just like type in
on your phone,
Clawhammer Banjo, and like, what are the seminal recordings? And they're like, okay, cool. I listen to Kyle Creed and Fred Cockrum, and like, but for me, it was just like, it was picking through. So that literally was the hardest thing. Was I didn't have anyone to learn off of really, and know. I really had to piece it together. I'm not saying that like oh, I had to walk to school in 3 feet of snow type of thing. I actually am glad for that, because I think it allowed me, because when you come at it in that sort of random way, I think it liberates you to just be your own player and have your own style, because you don't think there's any one way of doing it. Right. And so I guess that's something that I think that people beginners today, I think that they should be aware of, is that, like, although there's, you may learn from one person online, there's so many different players teaching online. There is no one way to play the instrument. There's no one way to play clawhammer. There's no one way to play bluegrass. There's no one thing you should do with the music. There's one just the idea of aesthetic. I've thought a lot about that. It's really important to me, and I think that's a thing that that beginner players should really. I mean, you don't want to. It's one of those things. I hasten to say, think about it, because it's like you want to be aware, mindful of it, and then forget it. But like, your aesthetic is so important, and the only way you get, you reach your, what your aesthetic is at any moment is from what you listen to and what you value before that. So I guess that's my advice.
Yeah. And what are some things that draws you to clawhammer banjo playing, or what are some things that you listen for in good clawhammer in clawhammer banjo playing that you like personally?
I mean, the thing that drew me to it was the fullness of it. Like, I remember listening to I still, like, I'll never forget listening to that Doc Watson thing the first day, and it was like the fullness of that basic strum. I mean, even though Doc Watson, now I know that he wasn't really doing that. He was doing a sort of up-picking variation, I think, on that. But it was still that basic thing where you're playing like those the sparse melody and backing yourself up so it sounds like two banjos at once. and just that, to me, that thing is just magical. And just that built-in just the built-in sparseness and sort of impressionism of frailing and clawhammer, because like when you're only like if you think of the clawhammer, like boom, rest, chukka, that basic strum, boom, rest, chukka, 1 2 3, like really you're only playing that one melody note out of every four possible. Right. And so it sort of just like forces you to be minimalist. And I mean, I think as an artist, that's such a great thing to be like forced into that right off the bat. It's in one sense a limitation of the style. On the other hand, it's, I think, one of its strengths. And so to answer the other half of your question, I really value simplicity. Like when I listen to Ola Belle Reed play, I always am like, you couldn't play that any better. Like that music. I mean, she's an incredible singer too. So it's the whole package, and her albums were produced so perfectly. But just if you just took her banjo playing out of it, it was like, it's perfect. It's simple. Like if I tab that out or teach it to somebody, it's going to be ridiculously simple. Right. But the way she plays it, her touch, her, just the whole feel of it and her dynamics and the intention in it, it's perfect. And like, so that's what I value. And the longer I play, the more and more I value that.
Yeah. Well, that really comes through in your playing a lot. 'Cause I mean, one thing that strikes me about your playing, it's not flashy at all, but you're getting great tone and you're getting the emotion across. And that's a simplicity that you're talking about, that minimalist. But it's so relaxed. Even when you're playing a fast fiddle tune, you have this relaxed feel. And how did you like, just on that first song, that opening song that you played, is just very relaxed and very, great tone coming through. How'd you kind of develop that relaxed touch? Because a lot of banjo players have this very, either rushed feel or just very kind of almost harsh attack on the strings too.
Right. Well, I've definitely, I've spent a lot of time playing with a metronome, and I still do. And I spent a lot of time playing. I play when I practice. I really only have one lick when it comes to practicing, and that's practicing very slow with the metronome. If I'm practicing, that's usually what I'm doing. I'm like, I don't have many ways of practicing. I'm either playing music or I'm practicing slow with the metronome, and I've sort of always done that since I was in my early 20s. And by slow, I mean like I have depending on how slow as slow as the metronome will go, which is usually either 30 or 40 beats a minute. So it's ridiculously slow. But what that does is it really lets you, like, if you think of music, like if you were to look at it like on a wave graph, or if you do look at it on a wave graph, there's much more silence than there is sound, especially on an instrument like the banjo that's got such a dry,
a quick
decay.
Yeah.
There's way more silence, so it makes sense to, when you're practicing, to spread that out and to focus on that silence and get very comfortable with that silence. So I've definitely, like, I'm really into that. I'm like almost like a meditation or something. I love to just spend a long period of time working at those slow tempos. And then I also like really believe in, that's like when I'm teaching, like one of the main things I talk about is like learning how to play with dynamics. I always say to my students is like, a lot of banjos, most banjo players I hear sort of have like 2 volumes off and on,
right?
And maybe 3 if they're lucky. But what you really want is, like, I try to get them when they're playing to be able to, I do this exercise. I mean, if there's any beginners watching, I love to get people doing this exercise where, like, so say you're just doing the basic strum. So you do the basic strum and you get it going at your whatever your sort of middle tempo is. Then you pretend that there's somebody with their hand on a volume knob, okay? Or in this case, I'll do it just like with a slider. So there's,
without slowing down while keeping the tempo.
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. The back up. Right? But you have to do it with a metronome because you will slow down when you go quiet and you'll speed up when you go loud.
Right.
I do. I probably just did that. I always do it with a metronome. And so what that gets you doing is sort of allowing the music to breathe. So on a tune like that, it's like that I just played. Not that, it's hopefully that came through my little internet mic. Right. But it's just like, like do that. And to me, that is the most, sometimes people complain. I've only had this. I had one person complain once at this workshop I gave. That they're like, well, that was supposed to be an advanced workshop, and it wasn't. Like, I didn't think that was advanced, and I was like, the most advanced thing you can do is play something simple with good feeling and dynamics and make it breathe and make it come to life. Right. That's advanced. Memorizing some like tongue twister tablature is not advanced. That's just a memorization exercise.
Right. Yeah,
If I may, I'm going to jump in real quick, just very quickly. Got lots of questions today, which is awesome, and I'm going to get to a lot of them later, but this seems appropriate for right now. Hillary has asked, Chris, could you demonstrate the slow and then kind of what it becomes in the fast method? She's really interested in how you might approach that.
So say that like how I practice slow?
Yeah, and then kind of an example of what it would eventually become.
Okay, well, let me see. Like, I'll show you how slow I practice, and if I just find a metronome here.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's cool. So I'm just gonna give myself a caveat. It always takes me, like, I've been doing this for years, and it always takes me a bit of time to warm up to the slow speed. So it'll take me a moment here of not being in time. So what I'm doing now is just going between two right hand techniques and trying to make sure they have the exact same time feel. And I don't do anything with my left hand yet. And then I'd eventually add start practicing a hammer, just nothing in particular. I'm not even playing a tune. And practice, throw a pull off. And I'm not specifically playing a certain thing, but once I decide on the little lick I'm gonna do, I'd stick with it for a while, and then I'd build up. So anyways, so I would slowly build up. I always start with just the basic strum, and I get that going. Then I do the basic strum on different strings. Then I add going like doing double thumbing back to basic strum, because really, without getting too deep into it, like in my opinion, there's only three things that happen with your right hand in clawhammer: basic strum, double thumbing, and drop thumbing. Different people have different names for these things, but there's three right hand techniques that cover 99% of all clawhammer. So you have to make sure, and in a tune, you're always going between those three techniques, some version of it. So what I'm practicing is my seams between those techniques, so that there's no time feel change between, like when I go from the basic strum to the double thumb. What I tend to do is when I go to double thumbing, I rush. So doing it with this metronome smooths that out, and then so like that could last, like I will sometimes do that for like an hour or just to warm up in the morning or something, and I just really focus on. Eventually, I'm playing a tune. Like at some, after about half an hour, I'm probably gonna play some tune, and I just play around until I find something that's hard to do with that. That's like, I always screw that up. Like I always lose time. And you can be sure that if you're losing time at that tempo, that you're doing it at the faster tempo. Nobody's noticing because it's happening so quickly, but all that stuff makes a difference when you add all those little things up. They make a difference, even if they're sort of on a subconscious level, I think, with the listener. And so if you can play it, I feel like if you can play it that slow and be in command of all that space in between the notes, that when you do speed it up, it's going to be solid. And I don't know, you're going to have a different understanding of the timing.
Yeah, that's great advice. We always try to tell people, practice slowly and get it all your kinks worked out, because if you speed it up, it's just going to be, they're still going to be there, and it's just going to be more jumbled together and less clean.
Apparently, John Hartford said that Buddy Emmons told him that Buddy Emmons would practice, because Buddy Emmons is who got John Hartford playing with a metronome, apparently, and that Buddy Emmons told John Hartford that you practice at the absolute slowest tempo that you're ever going to play a tune, or that you can ever imagine playing a tune, and the fastest. And he wasn't worried about the in-between, but he felt like if he could play it ridiculously slow and ridiculously fast, he didn't mess around with the in-between. Because that does become a thing if you're practicing with a metronome and you're like, it's like, oh, now pop it up to the next notch. It's like you sort of never get anywhere. And I think I agree with that a little bit. It's like, I think the slow playing will help your fast playing, but if you're really concerned with playing fast, you do need to play fast sometimes. You do need to, like, right. And so if I was going to do it, I would say like 70% slow, 30% fast,
right,
or something like that, or it's like some ratio towards there.
One thing I noticed in your playing too, you play your fifth string really lightly, which is nice, because the fifth string's coming all the time, and a lot of clawhammer players, you hear that fifth string pretty heavy, and so you hear this, it's the same note all the time coming ding 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 really loudly. Do you have anything? And I know some people tie off like something on their fifth string or mute it a little bit with it, or are you just attacking it very softly?
I pay a lot of attention to how that is. I like when I'm teaching double thumbing. So for those of you, there might be double thumbing is just this technique where you're sort of playing a melody note and then the fifth string's in between. So like if it was Arkansas Traveler. So I pretty much double thumb that whole thing. Mm-hmm. When I'm teaching people to do that, in my opinion, double thumbing most of the time, the thumb string should be subliminal. The person listening shouldn't hear it. They should feel it. It's like it's like so double thumbing without that thumb, that same thing. Right, it doesn't sound that much different, but this has a lot more. It's the backbeat, so it's really important, but it's not important as a note as a tone to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's important as a beat. It's the backbeat. It's almost like a drummer that plays behind the melody. So having it come out. So like my fifth string is probably about. That's how loud my fifth string is between my double thumbing. It's really just like it's almost like, not to get too into the mechanics of it, but it's really like just there's like I'm setting my thumb on that string and I'm taking it off when I'm releasing it. In fact, when I'm teaching people to do this these days, my favorite way of saying is like, don't think of like, when you're playing, like play a note, then play the fifth string, play a note, play the fifth string. Think of it as play a note, reset for the next note. Don't even think of that fifth string as being a note. And think of it almost as like a byproduct of the reset. And it doesn't even, it's just it's like you almost, if you set your thumb on that fifth string, if you just take it off, like you almost can't take it off without sounding the fifth string.
Right.
And I use a heavy fifth string on my banjo.
What gauge is it? Do you know?
13.
Oh wow.
So that allows me to like really dig into it, and I think it gives me tone. Like if I because sometimes you do want the fifth string. Sometimes it's a melody note.
Yeah.
Like I was actually using it on that first tune. I had that first tune I was playing. I had an interesting thing there. I was doing this thing where I tuned that fifth string. I'm in double D tuning, but instead of having the fifth string tuned up to an A note, which is the fifth, I have it tuned down to a what is that? F sharp, so that it's ringing the third of the chord. So in that first tune that I was playing, it's actually I use it as a melody note. It's like it's about like half the melody notes are that fifth string. So in that case, I want it to. Right. But when I get to the B part, it's not a melody note anymore. And then I want it to be light. So again, that's like paying attention to that subtle thing where it's like you're addressing that string differently at different times, and you've got that control.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice to be able to have control over playing it or having it as kind of a ghost note. Either way, be able to do both.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You also, you're a great songwriter and singer, and a lot of the time you're playing solo with the banjo and singing behind it. Do you approach your playing when you're singing differently than when you're playing a melody? Or
definitely. I mean,
and is there a certain pattern, like a certain sort of it's not a roll, but some sort of right hand pattern that you kind of fall into a lot of the time when you're playing, when you're backing yourself up?
There's a lot of different ones, and there's definitely one thing I do a lot in my playing is what I call rolls, and they're based on or they're not really based on, but they remind me a little bit. There's sort of patterns, double thumb, drop thumb patterns that I use that are like.
Yeah, similar to the way like Mark Johnson he does these rolls in his clawhammer playing.
Right. Yes, I'm sure he does too. I'm not that familiar with his playing, but they're just they're almost like finger picking patterns that I do.
Yep.
And I will do that behind my voice sometimes. But I mean, again, like, not to be a broken record about the less is more thing, but like the longer I do it, and I'm not like, I just gave a workshop on singing with the banjo, and I'm a person who was like, I'm not like I love singing, and I've been doing it for a long time, so I'm, I can do what I can do, and I can, I got my style on it. but I'm not. I'm not like one of these people who just like opens their mouth and beautiful things come out of it. Um, so it's something I've really had to learn to do, and the more I do it, and the longer I do it, the less I play behind my singing.
Because you're more comfortable with your singing, maybe, and you're not overplaying to kind of compensate just your anxiety possibly about singing. Do you think?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I don't want to. I've realized like the way I approach singing is like the way I think of it is that when you're singing with an instrument, be it a banjo or any other instrument,
Sure.
you're three people at one time. You're like, so if I'm playing with the banjo, I'm a banjo player, I'm a singer. So those are the two instruments, banjo, voice, and I'm also a storyteller. And you have to balance those three roles. And the most important of those three roles is the storyteller. And so anything you do on the banjo that first of all is going to split your attention away from the storyteller, which is like in the beginning that just means memorizing the words to the song. Then it sort of means eventually once you got that, it means actually being able to like, really be telling the story and living it,
Right.
Seeing it in your head and all that type of thing. The next most important thing is the voice, because like I feel like you don't have as much control, especially those of us who aren't like the most natural singers.
Sure.
The thing you have the most control over of those three things is the banjo. So that's the thing that I always start out real simple with that, and then I'll build on it. But my starting spot, I always say it's like one of the like the go-to ways people back up their singing on the banjo, it seems like, is you play the melody and you sing over top of the melody. Well, the problem with that is that like if I do that, right, so say I'm playing playing Shady Grove and playing the melody of Shady Grove and singing over it, that's all right if I can pull it off. I mean, that actually might be too much for me technically, and I'm gonna sort of be screwing it up. But the problem is like once I do that, there's two instruments playing. My voice is playing Shady Grove and the banjo is playing Shady Grove. When it comes time for the break, then it goes from two instruments playing Shady Grove to one instrument playing Shady Grove, the banjo. So it actually, like, apart from just being a lot easier to play simple behind your singing, it actually is sort of a lot of the time just a better strategy as a musical arrangement,
Right.
To do that. I don't know. I hope that makes sense.
That makes total sense. To keep the, so you don't have this dip in, it's of excitement level, where it's kind of lame for a second and then it gets back to an interesting spot.
Yeah.
Do you want to play something where you sing as well?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll play my song "Old Dog."
Yeah, that album is what I first drew me into you about a decade ago. Is that album and that tune? Yeah.
See, there's more to figure every day, but the more I talk, the less I say. Still, there's one thing that I know: I'm gonna miss that old dog when he goes. Well, blue is blue and cold is cold. Can't see no use in growing old. but the chilly winds will blow. I'm gonna miss that old dog when he goes. In a good old song I once was told, look up, look down that lonesome road. And I've tried to sing along, still I miss that old dog when he's gone.
Very nice. Very nice. Jamie, do we? You mentioned we have some questions coming in. I'd love to get to them.
You do, actually. Let me put me on here. All right, how we doing? All right, let me pull up a few of those here. So, Chris, first of all, like, really amazing to kind of sit here and listen and soak it all up. Really quite a privilege. So thank you for your time today. I didn't ask you at the beginning, do you have a time limit today, or are you okay?
No, I'm good.
Okay, great. All right, I think the first thing
I don't have a gig till like 2022, so
I shouldn't laugh, but it's
neither should I guess.
nah. But
What else
if you
are you
can't
gonna do?
if you can't laugh at it, then what's going to happen, right? So, I think probably the first place to start, and I know Dave, you had this in, but there's definitely a few people asking about that wonderful looking banjo you have in your hands, and if we can talk a bit about it, specifically a few people asking about the head and why it looks a little worn, and people asking about what tone ring is in there. So do you want to give us an introduction and
Yeah, sure.
talk about what you got there?
So this is my banjo. I call this banjo Scruff. This is the main banjo that I've played for many years, for the 27 years. It's almost everything I've ever recorded is this banjo. It's a 70s Vega, so it was either made at the Martin factory mid 70s or by Galaxy, which means I think it was made in Japan, maybe.
I want to say Korea or Japan.
Korea, yeah. So it's a tubaphone. Those are stamps that I've put inside it over the years. But just a tubaphone tone ring. It's a funny tubaphone, though, for those of you who are into it, is that it's got this thing. I don't know, what do you call
Bracket
this?
band.
Bracket band, yeah.
Bracket band. Yet it's still got the screws, right? Which usually if there's a bracket band, there's no screws, right?
Right. You're right.
You wouldn't need the screws.
The point of it, yeah.
Which is sort of a weird design, but I think it adds weight to the pot, which I think sort of helps the sustain of this particular banjo. The head is just a regular tubaphone head, but I was a busker, a subway musician for 12 years, and that's when this head sort of took on this patina, because it was really dirty down there in the subways, and it just got dirty over the years. And I've definitely had people question me on why I keep it, and beyond the fact that I mean I don't really care how it looks. At pretty much every gig I go to, someone comes up and tells me how much they love the painting on my banjo. So I mean, people seem to like the look of it, but my thing with it is if you had a guitar, like a vintage guitar that sounded awesome, like think of Willie Nelson's guitar or something,
Trigger,
that sounded amazing, but it was totally beat up, to the point you would never in a million years, no one would suggest you take the top off that guitar and put a new top on it. And I don't really see what the difference is with a banjo. There's nothing. Nothing is not functioning with this head. But I've been putting music through this banjo head for 27 years, and it still sounds good. So until something cracks or rips, I am not going to. I feel like it has to age. I mean, I know it's a piece of plastic essentially, but there's no reason it doesn't age the same way as a piece of wood does. Like in the mystical sense, like
Right,
there's
yeah.
probably people will say, oh, well, there's all wood's a
Sure.
organic substance. So but in the mystical sense, there's juju in this, or
Yeah, definitely.
or voodoo. So I would always leave it on. The other thing I've always done with my banjos, I've always used, and actually bringing this back to the Deering thing, I've always been very happy with the fact that the good time banjos have these
Guitar style
pretty much
tuners.
guitar tuners, because I've always used them. That first guy I mentioned, my very first teacher or second teacher, Rick Fielding, he was like a real workaday musician, and he always had electric guitar tuners on his banjo, and he was like, oh yeah, they work better than any banjo tuner. And in my experience, he's right. These work because of the gear ratio. So like I think it's like, what is the gear ratio on, like
16-1,
16
Like 14 to 1 or
as
16
opposed
14 to
to
1 or
like
something like that.
4 to 1, right,
Right.
on a banjo tuner. So
Exactly.
it's like essentially they're fine tuners. My friend Bill Rickard has made a straight through tuner. In fact, I've
Right.
got it on a banjo back there. That
It's
is
set on my desk right now. Yep.
12 to 1, and they work great too. Those are wonderful. But I've had these on for 25 years. Pair of Godot tuners. I think I paid $30 for them, for 6 of them. I had two spares, and they work just so well, and I'm so used to them.
Right.
But you're right. It's a fine tuner because you can rotate them and not, on a planetary, you really got to be very precise with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
that's
not
why we
like
put them on the good
difference
times.
between, people are like, well, it takes so long to tune. It's like, it doesn't. It's the difference between like that with a planetary or like that. So it's not really, to me, it's not like an issue. But I've always used those tuners. I've got a scoop here. Like, so a lot of people have you'll see the frailing scoop here. Years ago, I ran into a great banjo player named Mac Trainham, who made banjos, or still does, in Virginia. And he had this thing where he just hollowed out the edge of the banjo, and I thought that was a great idea. So I did that to this banjo. And the other nice thing about it is I like to play really high up the neck. And so if, like, for me, I play up here on about the 15th fret. So I would, if I wanted to hollow it out, like the whole neck, I'd lose everything beyond the 14th fret. Not that I play up there all that much, but it does come up occasionally. So it's sort of a great sort of way of scooping the neck, but not losing your
Losing
high
the fret.
frets if you want to play way up the neck.
Could you bring that a little closer to the camera?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's really cool. I've never seen that. Oh, look at that.
And actually, I saw Mac Trainham did that, but I've since been in touch with him, and he said that Kevin Enoch, who's quite a famous banjo player, he's the one who thought of doing that.
Okay.
Or as far as he knows, who knows? Somebody could probably find some old,
Sure.
version of the same thing.
Love it. I love it. I've never seen that before. That's very cool. I'll do that. Tom Patterson asks, I'm curious about whether Chris finds it too much of a division of energy to work both on Scruggs style and Clawhammer. Specifically, like how I think it sounds like he's having trouble balancing the two and transitioning between the two styles, and is looking to kind of see how you find that.
Well, I mean, I was lucky enough to start playing Scruggs style, and I only probably played it for about 6 months, but I was 17 at that time, so it really sunk in. I'm not really all that good at it, But I can sort of, you know how it is with stuff you learn when you're that young, you can get it back really quickly. I haven't put much time in it, so I'm lucky enough I can sort of fake it without too much practice. There are lots of people who can do both. I mean, one of my pals from Toronto, Frank Evans, who's plays banjo with the Slocan Ramblers. He's an excellent bluegrass and clawhammer player. He started with clawhammer and then moved to bluegrass. There's lots of people who can do both. I guess if you're having trouble, if you're finding that that's not working for you, then I guess I would suggest maybe choosing which one you like the most and putting some time. And then you might be surprised if you focus on just one for a while that you go back and like when you go back in a year and touch on the other one again, you'll be more, you'll have more understanding of the banjo as an instrument, and it'll make more sense to you.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, I'm going to ask one more, then I'm going to hand back to you for some continuation. This is fun. Sure. I'm enjoying this. So Michael has asked, and they're a little bit all over the map, so they're not consistent with one another. So it's a quick fire round. So what are your thoughts on a finger pick for clawhammer? I like the sound of natural nails, but it's not practical for me to keep them long. We get this quite a lot, actually. And it's a point of definitely like debate of what the best method is. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay. So I use fake nails. So I'm gonna do this gross thing where you're gonna see my fake. We're on lockdown now, so I haven't been able to get my fake nails fixed. But you can see how thick these nails are that I have. So they're acrylic nails. I go to a nail salon to get them done. I really like. I mean, I used to when I was busking. I used a finger pick on the. I used like just a national finger pick turned backwards. I used to use the bronze ones because theoretically they were a mellower tone. I'm not sure that I believe that could possibly be really actually make any difference, but maybe it does. If once you get used to using like just one of those metal finger picks, like you get so much more volume and clarity. And Frank, who I mentioned just a moment ago, he uses a backwards finger pick, and he gets so much volume and clarity out of his playing. A lot of people like one thing that a lot of people say about finger picks, and I've noticed it for myself too, is that when you do use a finger pick, that you don't get the same nice tone. And I agree with that. I think you do sacrifice some tone, except like the one sort of thing that doesn't line up with that is that my very favorite all-time favorite clawhammer player in the entire world, and the person I think who has the absolute best tone, is Kyle Creed. And he used a metal finger pick, and his tone is beautiful. So again, maybe he just had really great touch. One pick that when I do use a pick, and I don't do it very often, there's a fella up in Canada named Gord Acri, and he makes these picks. So the one thing I find that happens with finger picks is they fall off, and he makes these Acri picks. I think it's AKRI, and they really sit on your finger really nicely, and I really like those things. But again, I don't use them too often. But those are if I am using a pick, I mean it takes me a while to get used to it, but that's usually what I use. But or a national is fine. That's what I used to use when I actually did use a pick on a regular basis. I just used a brass national pick.
Awesome. Thanks for the advice. I've definitely got some more. Dave, I'm going to let you carry on for a little bit,
Sure.
And we'll come back. I've got some tuning questions. So.
And while we're talking about nails and your fingers, you're using your index finger mainly, right? Or do you use both your middle finger?
Well, I use my index finger for the most part. I use my index finger for like the so if you're thinking the basic strum, like the boom of boom chaka. is done with the index finger on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string When I move to the first string, I use my middle finger.
Interesting.
And I brush with my middle and ring finger, and then sometimes with my index fingers. So like a lot of times people will tell you, you'll see people who play, the boom note and then the brush with the same finger, which you can totally do. There's a lot of great players who do that, so it's definitely doable. The reason, well, not the reason, I just sort of naturally ended up doing this because I think it's the way Rick showed me. But the reason I teach people to do this, just for logic, if you think about it, on an economy of motion like way of looking at it, like if I play that first note with my brush and then brush with that same finger, my index finger, at the end of that downstroke for the brush, my index finger's down here underneath the strings. So if the next string I got to play is the fourth string, I've got a big jump to get back. Whereas if I brush with these two fingers, I can sort of separate them, and my index finger hovers here over the melody string, so there's not as much reset to get back. And then the other thing is that when you brush with more than one finger, if I brush with just one finger, I've really got one potential brush sound. I've got the sound of that one finger going down the strings. I can get the exact same sound with these two fingers if I hit them, if this is a string, if I hit them parallel with the string. But as I change the angle that I hit them with, I can almost get like a washboard effect.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that people talk about a lot, clucking. And that's how you get that. That's sort of doing, and I'm putting, when I really overemphasize that, I'm putting my index finger into that. So that's why I like to use all those fingers.
Is it, when you're getting the cluck thing, is it kind of like getting, like false harmonics if you're playing guitar, like with a flat pick, like heavy metal guitar or something?
Right.
You're kind
Maybe.
of,
I don't know. I mean,
but you're kind of like sitting the pick sideways like that. Are you kind of getting like a harmonic thing off of it, kind of? Because you're
I think so. I mean, even when I'm like often I'll do that when I'm double thumbing on the first string. I do this thing where it's like what happens, like you hit the string and then this finger deadens it right after. So like if I want clear double thumbing, that's just with my middle finger. And here I'll put my index finger in. And I mean, I don't know how you explain that, but to me it gives it it's just a different sound. And it's like, when it comes down to it, the more different sounds you have that you can control, the more interesting your playing is going to be.
Exactly.
But like that specifically, like that, the percussiveness of that, as opposed to the clear note.
It's almost kind of muting it and playing it at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I stumbled across that before. I never really knew. Nobody ever told me, and then it seemed to be the right thing. I never was really 100%. What about when you're playing with a group, like you're playing with like the Lonesome Ace Stringband or something? How does your playing shift than when you're playing solo? Because you now have to cut through a band a little more. In the Lonesome Ace, you don't have a guitar that you need to power through, so it's a little bit different. But if you're playing a classic string band with a guitar, does your playing change at all to kind of cut through?
Yeah, if I'm playing with a guitar player, I would definitely play less chords. I prefer to, like, I love not playing with a guitar player because the banjo and the guitar are in the exact same register.
Right.
So like, I love playing. I love that. The Lonesome Ace is the second band I've played in that's just bass, fiddle, and banjo.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy playing in that context because all the instruments are in their own. You got the fiddle, you got the banjo, and the bass, and the banjo is the only person in the middle. And if I am playing with, and so what I do, like the sacrifice I got to make when I'm playing in that situation is to play a lot of chords. I'm almost always playing a chord, even when I'm playing melody. Like I'm just constantly popping those chords in as I
A full
as I
strum,
go.
or you kind of
Yeah, a strum and or a strum on the on the downbeat. I often like whenever there's a chord change in the basic like in Clawhammer. So if you think of the basic strum again, boom, rest, chukka. On the boom note, you only got a single note. So if you were just playing that basic strum and like even playing chords, the chord change is there, and all the person hears on that chord change is one single note. They don't actually hear the chord till here, right? So I will constantly play whenever there's a chord change. I'm going to play a strum, a downbeat strum on that downbeat.
Right.
You know, so like that's something I'm always doing in that band, and just like I'm just always trying to line the chords out within the tune as much as I possibly can. If I was playing with a guitar, I wouldn't bother with that because the guitar's already doing that. There's no use. There's no use sort of, fight. Not really fighting it, but
and then moving into, I know we have some questions about tuning. Do you play with a lot of alternate tunings?
I mean, I play with my go-to tunings are G and double C, and then I got really into playing in the that F tuning that a lot of people play in, which is
What
like
is it?
G
Just
G
drop down?
modal with the fifth string tuned down.
Okay.
Do you know that tuning?
I don't know.
So
They're playing like sawmill tuning, like,
right now I'm in sawmill tuning, exactly.
and for
But
those
what I'm-
that sawmill
what I-
tuning, for those that don't know, is
Yeah,
what?
is G, G, D, G, C, D. So the what's usually like for usual banjo tuning, this would be a B, the second string. So it's tuned up to a C. So in a way, it's not a minor, right? Because that would be flattening it to a
Flat it to a B flat, yeah.
B flat, and but it's tuned up, so it's got that. It's a suspended chord. So that's what you would hear, Shady Grove. Or Little Sadie, or all those dark sounding tunes. But what this tuning is I take that fifth string, I tune it down to F, and then what I do is I actually chord the banjo. So it's really different than other clawhammer tunings in that it's not an open tuning. It's actually a closed tuning. I'm always going to have this chord down. I'm going to chord this F chord. So most of you who are used to playing in G think of this as the F chord, but I've already got this string tuned up.
Right.
So my F chord is this, almost like a G chord on the guitar. So I'll play that as my 1 chord, and then I've got a 4 chord and a 5 chord.
Right.
And the neat thing about that tuning is that it's sort of like, for modern clawhammer, this is not like a secret tuning. Like Adam Hurt uses it all the time, Dirk Powell uses it, everyone uses it, Riley Bogus, everybody knows this tuning now. It's like, it used to be sort of an underground thing, but it's not so much anymore. It's just a common tuning for everyone to use. So the thing is, it's an F tuning. So I like it because my voice often G is a little too high, so I can sing songs in this tuning that I'd really be struggling with in G. The other cool thing is if I use the capo, it allows me to play in, like, because I'm in F now. If I put the capo on, I'm in G, right, with the second with the capo at the second fret. And
did you change the fifth string?
Pardon?
You changed the fifth string? Okay.
So in this, it's actually even better because I don't have to tune the fifth string down usually.
Gotcha.
Do you get it? So
yeah.
put this up, and I just leave the fifth string where it is, and I'm in G.
Right.
Right. So it allows you to play in. Now I can play with the capo on the second fret. I can play in G, I can play in A, and I can play in D. But so here's the cool thing. I got into doing this, and got very comfortable playing in this tune. Then I realized I was like, damn, this is like not really that different from playing, like it's only one string different from double D tuning.
Right. Right.
And so what I've gotten into recently in the past couple years is instead of using that tune, I just stay in D, double D tuning.
But the fifth string is still G.
I leave the fifth string down, so the fifth string is so it's not double D, it's G. So I leave the fifth string out of the capo. G, D, A, D, E, and then I have these two what I call home bass chords. So like in the other tuning, this is my home bass chord, but in this tuning, I have to compensate. But what I can do, I can play in G really easily because I'm so used to playing out of that other tuning. I can pretty much do anything I can do in that other tuning out of D. Plus, I've got a way better 5 chord because I've got the low D note, which is that's the note in that other tuning I was talking about. That's the note you're always missing, is that low D note. So it's actually, I actually prefer to play out of D, like D out of G, basically.
That's interesting. I've got to definitely try it out. I haven't experimented with these. That's cool.
I have a couple of tuning questions. This is why we're on the subject, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Frank Hawkins asked, actually he wrote in on an email this morning, so he was way ahead of the curve. He asks, Chris, is there such a thing as C modal tuning? And if so, what would be the notes for the strings?
Well, that's a great question. So the tuning that most of us use for C is double C tuning. So the reason that there is a G modal tuning, there's a G tuning and a G modal tuning, is that in G tuning, that second string is a B note. So it's which is the third of the chord, and that's the chord. That's the note. Like as I was talking about before, if you flatten it, it becomes a minor chord. If you sharpen it, it becomes a suspended chord. In C tuning, the double C tuning, which is G, C, G, C, D, doesn't actually have a third. In order for it to be a full chord, like if you just strum that open, I think it's a G9 chord.
Yeah.
To make it a major chord, you got to put your finger on the second fret of the first string, which puts that what is that, E note in there. And that gives you the third, and that gives you a major chord. But the cool thing about that is if I put my finger just down one fret, I've got a minor chord. Or if I don't want like a minor sound and I just want a similar sound to that G modal sound, as long as I don't put my finger on that second fret, I've got that. I like the open string is not a major chord, so that means that double C tuning is your modal C tuning. So if I want to play, I don't know why I keep mentioning Shady Grove, but if I want to play Shady Grove in this tuning, so I'm not playing that in a minor. If I was playing that in a minor, I'd put my finger here. Anyways, you get the idea. I can play. I get that minor sound by just not completing the major chord there. So you don't need that was a long answer. All I was trying to say was that you don't need a C modal. Double C tuning already is a C modal tuning.
There you go. That's a really good way of answering it, though. I learned some stuff, so I appreciate that. Casey also asks, do you have a favorite tuning that you like to play in?
And
you can say no.
Double C. double C's, like if I'm just sitting around in the backyard, it's probably what I plan. I love it just because it's got. I love I like that F tuning I was talking about before, and the
Mm-hmm.
G tuning. The G tuning, the G out of D I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly like that for for practical
Practicality.
purposes,
Yeah.
just because it just means I don't have to really retune to go between a few different keys, and I can even I'm sort of starting to get into play in A out of D tuning too, which is also not really that hard. So I like that. I like those tunings just because it makes it so much easier. But like for the sound of a beautiful banjo tuning, I sort of don't think you can beat double C because you've got that low bass note, and again you've got that versatility. I tend to, even if I'm playing major tunes, I like the sound of that suspended note. It's sort of modern sounding, I think, but it suits me. Um, and I love the sound of it. There's so much you can do with it.
Love that. I love that. Dave, how you doing?
Doing well.
I'm just reading the chat.
Maybe you give a lot of you've given a lot of lessons online during lockdown, right? Do you want to talk about anything coming up? I know you have a workshop coming up in January.
I do. I give. I do obviously just like every other musician in the world. Uh, I'm doing Zoom lessons. I've actually been. I've always taught. I love teaching. Um, uh, and so sort of in a way nothing new, but I'm definitely doing more of it than I used to. I give private Zoom lessons. I have also been doing these once a month, about once a month or once every 5 or 6 week, uh, topic specific Zoom courses. So they've all ended up being about 2 hours long. I've done 6 of them so far, I think, and um, they're all, for instance, I did one on that G out of D thing I was talking about. I've done one on the rolls thing I was talking about, a bunch of them, and they happen live. I do them live, but they're not really interactive. They're almost like a seminar. So it
Okay.
doesn't actually matter if you take them live. Like you can, any of the ones I've done in the past, you can still take them after the
Right.
fact and just watch the
The
watch the
recording.
workshop. And they all have a really I like to write about music, and I'm sort of working on a book, and so they have pretty good substantial sort of written like booklet thing with each one.
Yeah.
And the next one I'm doing is the last one I did was about singing with the banjo, and was sort of on that thing I touched on about the idea of like thinking of it as 3 different roles that you're playing when you're singing and playing the banjo. The next one I'm doing is called uh, it is called
The dirty tricks.
Strummy, the explosion lick, funky bass lines, and other dirty tricks for clawhammer banjo. And it's sort of three sort of like minor techniques that are like that I use all the time in my playing. You can check it out. I made a little video to sort of, because I know it's a little. I mean, who knows what that even means? So I made a video to sort of help show what I'm talking about in all those 3 techniques. So it's just like 3 weird techniques that I use a lot in my playing, and how to apply them.
And you'd find these. Somebody would find these on your website.
Uh-huh. Yeah, www.chriscoole.com. And
Okay.
I'm also doing, in February, I'm doing an absolute banjo from scratch 4-week course for anyone who wants to, is curious about learning to play. So that's like a total beginner
Yeah.
course.
That's perfect. All these people will gain their new banjo for Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll be set.
Those of you who are interested, I just dropped a link to Chris's website in the chat. So please take a look at that.
And for these workshops that you've done in the past,
Oh,
there we go. Hey, these workshops in the past, can somebody find them even though they've already gone on, or is
yeah,
it
yeah,
okay?
yeah. I mean, you can. They're sort of the only difference between taking them like live and not live, like taking them in rerun form, is that you can't like
do the chat,
ask questions in live time in the chat, because it's not like people aren't like, I have everyone turn their cameras off and they're muted, so it's not like there's no interaction. It's sort of all about presenting the material and then giving you what you need to work on in the future. So they're all good, and people seem to really enjoy, like a lot of people have taken them after the fact, and I've got a thing up on the page, on like the private page, to download like a blog basically, that if you do have a question, you can ask it after the fact. So it's really no difference taking it live or not. It's just sort of fun to take it live.
Okay, I'll definitely check it out. They sound great. I'll definitely check it out. I know. We do have not a question. It's a request from David Halloran. He would love you to play "Rock About My Sarah Jane."
Oh God,
I've got a second request to back that one up as well.
Okay.
If it's
it's just that I did play that on an album like about 3 or 4 years ago, but I didn't sing it. So
okay. We'll try the second request. What do you have, Jamie?
Paul Stanley asks, can you perform, he says, Undone in Sorrow if you are taking a request for a musical treat. So.
Again, I'm not sure I can.
We didn't script this.
I have to say, Paul Stanley is one of my students, and he's responsible for this gigantic bag of cheesies that's behind me. So I sort of do owe him, but I can't do that tune. If I was going to play one more tune, I'd love to show you guys a really interesting banjo, which I'm sure this is the moment if you're going to show people an interesting banjo.
That sounds good. I hope everyone's enjoying this. This has been so much fun to listen to. We've had many dogs on this show, but we have never had a bag of cheese that's that big. So it's a first.
So this is a banjo that I got in when I was in the UK last year. I was playing at a festival called the Sweet Sunny South Festival, and this thing was for sale. It's an old English banjo from the 1890s, originally a 7-string banjo, but it's now tuned up as a 6-string, which means it's got an extra bass string on it. And I've always been interested in that, and so I bought it. It was a great deal, and I bought it, and I've been really getting into it. I love it, and so the way it works, so this string is the extra string is, or the way I do it anyways, is I always leave it as a G note. Mm-hmm. So when I'm in normal G tuning or G modal, it's an extra low root note, but when I'm in double C tuning, it's an extra 5th. Mm-hmm. And at first I started, I mean, this is going to get specific to Clawhammer players. At first I was totally always thrown off by it, until I realized that when I'm in G tuning, well, actually I'll just
David and I were talking earlier on. David, I think you were asking. You heard some like nylon strung banjo on one of the records. Is that the one that we heard on the record?
No, I've never recorded anything with this one. That would have been that Gourd banjo back there.
Okay.
Cool.
But this does have nylon strings. That's another thing. So right now this is in G modal tuning, mm-hmm. but it's got an extra bass note in it. So I've got that extra root, and what I realized is that when it's tuned like this, those bottom 3 strings are in the same alignment as they are when what I'm used to in double C tuning. Mm-hmm. Okay, right. Even though I'm in G tuning, it's a bit of like a
it's a 5th and then a 4th.
So I'm in G tuning now, but these bottom 3 strings have the same relationship as double C. So once I got in, once I sort of figured that out, it sort of made more sense. And then when I'm in double C tuning, bottom couple strings are in the same alignment as G tuning. So I guess all this to say, it doesn't make, probably most of you have never touched one of these things, but there are 6-string banjos out there.
Yeah.
Just for anyone who's wondering, one of these, this particular, no, this one doesn't have any string attached to it. So one of these tuning pegs is ornamental.
Right.
But anyways, once you get used to it, each tuning sort of becomes half of each of the other tunings. So the low part of double C tuning is what you're used to, the strings being in G tuning, and the low part of G tuning is what you're used to, the strings being in double C tuning. So anyways, I'll just play you. I'll play you something on this.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's neat because I can get that same, those same. It allows me to get the tunes in 2 different octaves in most cases.
Right.
Or
right.
close enough for jazz, anyways.
Oh, that sounded great. That sounded really cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's been an hour and a half, and I think it's probably a good place to wrap. Dave, you have any more questions? Final thoughts?
No, just thanks. It's been great. There's a ton of information that I know myself will be checking out, watching it again to grab, and our viewers I know will enjoyed it too.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I always like blabbing on about the banjo.
We do too. We could sit here for a long time and keep going.
I will say we do have a question from the wonderful Paul Stanley, who he says, that's okay, Hawkins cheeses only in Canada. But he's also asking, he says, just curious, is the neck on a 6-string straight off the neck and not angled like a 5-string?
The peg.
I think I understand what he's asking.
Oh, no, it's still like this.
Yeah, I think that's what he's talking about.
It does look. It looks from this angle, for some reason it looks sort of flat.
Yeah.
But no, it's angled.
It's angled back. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would need to be. Whereabouts in England were you when you found that?
I can't remember.
It's small. North, south, east, or west?
South of London.
There you go. It's probably my neck of the woods. There you go. Very cool.
Have you heard of the Sweet Sunny South Festival?
I have, yeah.
It's there. Okay. That's where I was.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know what that is. I just remember the exact. It's kind of a small location. I'm trying to remember exactly where it is.
It is.
Very cool. Very cool. Chris, any final thoughts?
No, just thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And from all of us here, I think we're going to do one next week as well. So we'll announce that in due course. But I think in the meantime, everybody, please stay safe, stay well, stay happy, stay positive. Chris, I know you just played, but would you mind just playing us out a little one more time?
Sure.
Doesn't have to be that banjo. I hate to beg.
I'll play this banjo. I'll play a I'll play a Bill Monroe song, a sort of a winter song.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.
Some folks like the summertime when they can walk about. Strolling through the meadow green is pleasant, there's no doubt. Just give me the wintertime when the snow falls all around. I found her when the snow was on the ground. I traced her little footprints in the snow. Found little footprints in the snow. Lord, I bless that happy day. Nellie lost her way. Oh, I found her when the snow was on the ground. I dropped in to see her, there was a big round moon. Her mother said she just stepped out, would be returning soon. Found her little footsteps and I traced them in the snow. I found her when the snow was on the ground. Oh, I traced her little footprints in the snow. Found her little footprints in the snow. Lord, I bless that happy day when Nellie lost her way. Oh, I found her when the snow was on the ground. I know I'm gonna see her in that promised land. The only time spring falls, it brings back memories. Found her when the snow was on the ground. Oh, I traced her little footprints in the snow. Found her little footprints in the snow. Lord, oh, bless that happy day when Nellie lost her way. Oh, I found her when the snow was on the ground. I bless that happy day when Nellie lost her way. Oh, I found her when the snow was on the ground.
Very good. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.